Hello and welcome once again. And the common question that's being asked are what are the sources for teen stress? Well, what's really behind that isn't it's just what are the sources. It's really about what do we do about that? How do we help them deal with those four major sources? And that's exactly what we'll be talking about in this video. Now, the four major stressors facing teens haven't really changed a lot, right? It is academic pressures, is family expectations or living up to other people's expectations, it's the social interaction and fitting in or trying to belong. It's now this probably has escalated some, but it's that fear of the future. Like, what's the future going to hold for me? And lastly, we got to talk about what to do about those things. And that's what we're going to be covering next. What is one of the pressures that teens face? Academic pressures. Now, this hasn't necessarily really changed, although stakes could be getting higher. What I mean by that is there's some subtle pressures now being placed on teens through like school departments and all because test scores now are about money coming in as well. If you're not really doing well academically as a school district, if your students aren't performing well, that can impact the money that comes in. It can impact the careers of the people who are put in charge of schools. So that's putting some pressure in there. And that message, in some very subtle ways and not so subtle ways, gets passed down to students. And then it's being indicated more and more the importance of doing well so you can get not just into the right college, but the scholarships that you might need to pay for college. Get that financial aid package that you need because the cost of college has increased dramatically. It's much different than it has been in previous generations. So that is, it adds that whole feeling of stress that students feel in terms of academics, that they really need to perform well. And the American Psychological Association has reported that over 16% of teenagers feel regular or persistent feelings of stress related to academics. Teenagers, we have said this in a number of other videos, have a need to belong. We all do. It's especially acute for teenagers. So this belonging or trying to fit in adds stress, particularly for those kids who are a little awkward. They're going through puberty. Their self-esteem's not all that good. And maybe they aren't as athletic or some of the other things that within school cultures can make a difference. Like some schools have a really strong music culture, and if they aren't really feeling comfortable or doing well musically or athletically, as athletically is a huge one, right? Athletics in our culture is such a big one. But if they don't fit in any of those kind of areas, then they don't feel about as good as themselves, and that escalates the whole stress thing. Then there's other things that have happened over the last decade or so in many states. Has been more movement again for school consolidation. This goes back more than a decade, but this process, and there's not a lot of data, but there is some data, there is some research, and it makes sense if you want to think about this. When you consolidate high schools, you're bringing in more towns into a high school. Some of those social connections become harder. The school becomes bigger, right? So it's easier to get lost within that school. The commutes are longer. That can add stress. The time, you know, crunch now becomes harder because you're spending more time on a bus or even in cars trying to get back home late at night, school. But all those kind of cultural components can make a big difference. I still remember having a conversation with one of my professors back in college. So this was a number of years ago when I was working on my master's degree. And he was also a school board member in a rural district that pushed for consolidation. And he told me it was one of the biggest mistakes of his career because what it did to the communities was detrimental. It took away some of their self-identity, some of the community aspects that were so important for teens as well as adults, but the teens and their emotional growth and all. And he became an opponent for some of this school consolidation for those reasons. There's a lot that can go on within a family structure that can create stress for teenagers, right? Let's first talk about parental relationships. We know that a lot of marriages are now ending in divorce. So those sort of conflicts add stress for teenagers. So there's that. But there's also this expectations of doing well, even in a really solid, good family structure environment, right? Some subtle pressures to try to do well. There can be subtle messages. Parents don't even necessarily directly uh, communicate to their child about the financial aspects. Children who have that deep connection with their parents and love them don't want to see them struggle, but might hear their families talking about how we're gonna help them in college, how we're gonna pay for this, and that puts pressure on them to maybe do well so they can get that scholarship. And there's the expectation maybe getting into the right college or my alma mater or any of those things that, again, we got to understand that teenage mind in particular, but all of us can, we delete, we distort, we generalize. So we imagine what somebody else might be thinking, and that imagination creates, has a potential to create stress. And that's what teenagers do really well. They imagine what somebody else is thinking. They take what they might have heard and twist it around, blow it out of proportion, make generalizations out of it. And all of that, there's a lot of unwritten communication that's going on that teenagers begin to feel the stress of unwritten expectations. The growing body of research about the depressive future that teens see for themselves. So this kind of fear about future opportunities and what's going to be going on in the future adds stress. It adds stress to anybody. But once again, just when you think about teenagers at a developmental level, when they are seeing negative things on the news, hearing negative reports, seeing a lot of conflict in the news politically, internationally, hear adults talk about this or get conflicts politically as those kind of discussions are can get amped up. All of that begins to paint a negative picture for the child's future. And again, they begin to perseverate over what they imagine it to be, which is more often now than it maybe used to be, negative. And when you think negative thoughts, that increases the stress in your body. I got to tell you about one family whose uh, two boys, father, mother had left them. Father was a very driven entrepreneur, very wealthy, made a lot of money in real estate, and talked a lot about his alma mater and the importance of education. And one of them was really being driven athletically. Uh, the father was there supporting them and everything, but pushing, trying to help them get better. Training program, this training program, flying them to places, these special camps, getting special coaches, pushing with the expectation, not so subtly, about being able to play Division I baseball and getting a contract. The younger brother was much more about academics and getting into the top universities to show their academic prowess, and the science, which was really where it was being pushed. And all of that put a whole lot of pressure on these two young men who I had in my programs. And it took a toll. It took a toll on them, and the work we had to do with the boys. Also, I ended up, trying to work with a father as well, with how to communicate things in a different way. And it's good to push, good to have high expectations, but there's a fine line between overdoing it. Bottom line is we gotta help teenagers develop habits in their life to how to handle stress. You cannot remove stress from people's lives, adults or teens. And there are, again, video after video, I talk about mindset shift and shifting mindset. It's finding some of those beliefs that you have held on to, negative emotions, these decisions you made, the labels you've accepted that are putting glass ceilings on you, that shape how you react to situations. We got to change those. We got to clean those up. Then we got to build more positive habits for how to deal with stressors going forward. When you do that and you train that, understanding that this is going to be constant from here on out. It's like you regularly have to weed your garden. Got to get those weeds out. It's the same thing with this. But when you give them those tools, that is the best prescription for dealing with stress in their life. That wraps up another video, and that last little portion is actually, we have another video that you might want to check out, which is much more in depth on that. How to help teens deal with stress. You check that video out today. And of course, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. And I'm looking forward to the next video.